this moment because, you know, that's who I am right now. You know, we gotta spread the wealth here. We gotta get B a new move. Brave nature. Respect. Brave nature on B. So, and, sorry. So, when I first started getting into this, it was, you know, getting through all that. That was kind of my reconnection through Pokemon. And then stories started to spill kind of into my head. But I was writing, for college credit, I wrote a Batman script. I was required to do 30 pages, so I did 144. And then it was a trilogy on how to end Batman. But the whole time I was thinking of ideas for Pokemon. And then as I was starting to finish the Batman script up, I sat down with our friend Kyle. This is a very long-winded answer, my apologies. And let's see if we can catch anything new quick. And it was just like, what if, you know, wouldn't this be cool? Wouldn't this be cool? And it was just what if scenarios. And I was like, you know what, that would be cool. That would be cool. So I was doing all those things. And I was like, well, okay, after I finish Batman, Pokemon's going to be the next project I tackle. I'd love to see like a real Pokemon story with like real threats. Classic gateway. Batman is into Pokemon. I know, that's just how my brain works. It's very, very much just insane. It's just an insane pathway how my brain works. But that's kind of how I approached it. It was like one of the things I like to do to try to help myself when I get a little down, and it's what I tell everybody through a work capacity or a creative capacity, is I just saw a clip and I didn't know I did the same thing as Michael Keaton, which is insane because, you know, it's my Batman. But when he used to audition for parts, at first he's like, oh, I have to audition. You know, I don't know if I'm going to, and he was really nervous. And then eventually what got him to be far better and get more roles was he just like, I'm not going to audition for the part. I have the part. I'm going to work. So he looked at it as a challenge and he got more parts that way. And so that's kind of how I like to approach everything of what I'm doing is you're not trying to be a Pokemon artist. You are a Pokemon artist. And, you know, just because your art isn't Ken Sugimori's, or, you know, your art isn't exactly like some of the other great, you know, I've seen a lot of really cool, you know, fan-made regions. I don't even like to call Fakemon because I think it's almost a derogatory term in my head, which is weird. Because I get why it exists. I'm not trying to be rude about a statement like that, but it's just kind of like, for me, it's kind of like it takes away some of the love and the passion from it. So some fan-made regions, like at first I'd compare my art style to theirs, and I was like, I'm nowhere near as good as these people. But then I kind of started getting back into that classical approach that I was talking about, where I was just like, no, you are a Pokemon artist. You are this thing, and you have just as many valid thoughts on Pokemon, and you have just as many thoughts on disconnected. Reconnect. 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 We back! I don't know how much of my rant you missed on that one. But what I was saying is, like, you're like, when you want to start a project, you know. Oh, not calling them Fakemon. So I could, like, Fakemon is like a term that apparently my OBS studio went down for a little bit. My apologies, everybody. But I don't like the term Fakemon because I think it kind of is a derisive way to take away from someone's creativity. And I get why the term exists. I'm not trying to be one of those holier-than-thou artists that's like, oh, you're belittling my art. You know, like, I'm not trying to be that guy. Because also, there's a lot of there's a lot of people in the art world that make me despise art. So like it's a very weird balance for me. But what I like to think about it is when I would compare my art style to someone else's that makes phenomenal, really cool looking Fakemon. When at first I'd get really discouraged, and then I thought about it more, and I was like, yo, you know what? Like, you have just as much thought and passion that goes into your designs that makes them no less than them. Yeah, sure. Even by your own standard of art, you wouldn't consider your designs as good as theirs. And that's okay. There's nothing saying that you can't have that, right? But, you know, I looked at him far more like the Michael Keaton way of like, no, I'm just designing Pokemon, I'm going to work, I'm like, these are the Pokemon I create. And it really, really helped. And I think it's no different when you're getting into streaming, you know, for me, like doing the Pokemon card thing or anything like that. Anything I do now, it's very much just like it's in a weird way, like a minor way of method acting, where it's like, no, I am this thing and I do this thing and I do it my way. Not to say it's the right way or the best way, but I do it my way, and that's kind of the brand of way of thinking I put on it, and it helps just to get through, and it keeps me from getting discouraged. It keeps me from, you know, freaking out about a couple things and thinking I'm doing everything wrong, because I do everything guerrilla. I just do it. And that's a super long-winded way of approaching things. Because I don't know how I got on this train of thought. But what I was going off of was Aislinn always points out when she's really, you know, high. Every time I get into her stream, and I really just tune in to say hi and support because of how supportive she has been of mine. Good way of combating imposter syndrome. A lot of people worry about it, whether they cannot be what they want, so they just come into the mentality of being it. I think that's a great way to handle it. And like, that's why, honestly, I love, because I met Aislinn and I met you through the process of already gaining confidence. It was almost as if I already had my first fan, which is so weird, but it's such the boost of confidence you need. And every time I get into her Aislinn's stream, she does such a wonderful job of just saying, you guys should really go check him out. He has such a thought process. I love his thought process. I love how much he thinks about this. When I first did it, this was just it was a story. I had a story in mind, and I needed Pokemon to tell that story. And then, like, I remember starting to think of some quick designs in my head, and I'm like, well, I can't do this without designs in my head. I need to get them on paper so then I can describe them better, and then I can look at them a little bit more and show you if my, you know, when my fire starter, starts to take flight. How does it take flight? Why does it take flight? Why does it do the things it does? So it's kind of like I needed the physical example. And then when I was doing it, I got far more into character design and research on character design. And I took it from and I looked at movies, I looked at comic books, I looked at all this kind of stuff. And some of my favorite clips, there's a clip of Mark Hamill. He's describing Darth Vader. And it's like Vader's entrance onto the Rebel ship, like the first scene you ever see Vader in Star Wars. And Mark Hamill went on set because he wanted to see it when Vader first showed up. Because Mark Hamill at his core is just a big nerd, which I adore. And he asked George Lucas, like, oh, why don't you have someone in the background saying, like, oh my god, that's Lord Vader, he's the Dark Lord of the Sith, he's this, he's that. And George Lucas literally said, well, he's wearing all black in a dark, scary costume. The entire rest of the scene is white. We're going to put in some darker, scarier music. You know, the audience will get it. And Mark Hamill was wowed because it's such, like, as he says, economical storytelling that, you know, so much of Vader is communicated just through appearance. And you immediately get, well, that's the bad guy. And then you start to learn about him, and it makes him far more interesting. So I look at that as like inspiration to it. I look at the reason why, Batman looks the way he looks. Why does Superman look that way? Why does Wonder Woman or Spider-Man look the way they do? It tells you something about them. And then, as I got more and more into that thought process, each Pokemon started to be far more... What's up, Pokemon trainer? You bug catcher? Jam out if you're... You can't jam out if you're a Pokemon trainer. Yeah, I can. Once you get into the thought process of that, every Pokemon deserves that treatment, so it's not lesser. And I think that's a really interesting concept that, made me appreciate this franchise even more, is that I think everyone still has a right to be critical of Pokemon that they don't like, by all means. But it made me really start to think a lot more about just being like, that Pokemon sucks. There are Pokemon I definitely don't like. There are definitely Pokemon that I think are just utter trash. Because they just don't fit my sensibilities. They don't fit what I like. And that's okay. But then I also was like, someone worked really, really hard on that design and probably had a thought process. And they do that. The Pokemon Company does that. Every 3 years, they're cranking out another 80, 90, 100, in some cases 150 plus Pokemon. And so, it's so gratifying an experience. So when I join, for anyone watching this again, Ace Trainer stream, you should follow her. She's amazing. When I hop on a stream that Aislin's running, that she always points out the thought process. There's so much thought behind it. And it really just makes me appreciate the franchise, and it makes me appreciate my stuff more, because I know people then care more. And and you can see it more. And Beatrix, you gotta get it together, girl. Come on. Come on, B. Get it together. Thank you, B. Appreciate it. You're great, B. I love you. Oof. Level 7. Let's go. About to use Weedle. Yes, green is going to change Pokemon. And it's going to go to Clive. Let's roll, buddy. Come on, Clive. Come on, Clive! I don't even know what I was talking about, specifically to Chris, a good friend in the chat, who's seen as Dermu. But, when I'm doing this, and it's made me fall in love with Pokemon so much again. Where I loved it as a child to the point where, to this day, I do not get on an airplane without a copy of a Pokemon game. Rarely do I actually play it, but I just can't get on a flight without one. But it's the thought process and the creation and this hopeful world that, the Pokemon Company created for us that is just so breathtakingly beautiful in its simplicity and its hopefulness that I really, really appreciate. And then when you throw someone with the dark, twisted sensibility of myself into it, it's even crazier. But I never wanted to lose the hopefulness. I never wanted to lose the fact that it's just fun. That's what I'm talking about, Clive! I think you hit the nail on the head, though. People seem to be very critical about the works that come out, but I think one of the biggest appeals of the series is just how much thought gets put into it. Yeah, I think that's so true. Is, for me, I can't stand the girder line in Gen 5. It's one of my go-to, oh wow, this is awful. And I don't like the veins. I don't like the entire thing. It's just not my cup of tea, right? But then there is a thought process to it. And there is truly a love and care put into that Pokemon. That when you get in game, you're thinking of it like a Pokemon trainer in a world where we live with Pokemon, where it's just like you're in, you go, and you just do, and you need to go get to the gym and win a battle. You need to go beat Team Rocket. You need to go, obtain this fossil and get it to the lab so you can get your Aerodactyl. Whatever the case may be, you're not thinking of it from that way. But then, when you actually take that step back and look at this bright, beautiful world, that truly it's so bright, and that's what I'm talking about, Clive. I'm now starting to love Rattata just through Clive. This bright, beautiful, hopeful world that the Pokemon Company gave us all the way back in '96. I was 4 years old, and they gave this to the world. And oh no, we're gonna lose Clive. No, Clive. But it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing with how much thought is put into it. And when you actually sit back and think about that, it is such an amazing achievement. And it makes it so much more, it makes it so much easier to understand why Pokemon is, it's the highest grossing media brand of all time. It's bigger than Marvel and Star Wars and DC and, any other franchise ever, because it has this simplistic story to tell of a kid growing up with its pets. Really, that's all it is. And when you think about how beautiful that sentimentality is, all wrapped up into this game where it's little monsters growing and attacking each other and trying to show their dominance and their supremacy, there's so much depth. But it's coated in this beautiful layer of simplicity of who you are and growing up. And I just think that's so wonderful. And I think that's the reason I'm so drawn to it, is there's so much thought and heart and warmth poured into the Pokemon, poured into